Here's a question for you. Who needs who more? Does Jon Jones need the heavyweight division, or does the heavyweight division need Jon Jones? And I'm just asking about more. Because as this gets closer, as the return of Jon gets closer, I must tell you, I get more and more interested, and I would even put my interest on the side of excited. The Jon Jones experiment is one that I am watching extremely closely. And when Jon used to do a little bit better job of coming out on social media and bringing us all into it, I was the first one there. And even if I come to you guys and act like a jerk about it and try to dismiss him because I got a personal thing with Jon Jones, in fairness, I was interested. Jon Jones walking away from 205 pounds, moving into heavyweight, and taking X amount of time to change the physiology of his body so that he was what he believed to be big enough. And I have to word it like that because I think Jon Jones could have done just fine at heavyweight, weighing in at 205 pounds. I think that he's that talented. He mentally needed to weigh 240, and he told us that. Where that number came from, is that an arbitrary number? Did he study it? Did he know himself, who he looked, why he came up with 240? He's never disclosed to us, but this is what he disclosed, and then he went to work. He got into the lifting. He got into the proteins. I'm sure he had to eat more. I'm sure he had to run less, right? I mean, it's ultimately calories in to calories out, and you're talking about good weight, and he was putting on some pretty good weight, man. He was looking good. That's just a hard thing to do, particularly post-30. I believe that particularly for males, you have control of your body once you're 25. Your body's not going to grow. It's not going to throw you off. It's not going to change things. Jon did it on purpose. And I can just remember back to my youth, taking a break in the summer, 2 months off, come back into wrestling practice. It was like it was my first day. I'm 2 inches taller. I've gained 8 pounds, but that threw off my timing. It threw off my balance. It threw off my position. I mean, I remember this year after year after year. I'm sure you guys can relate. But I had no control of that. I didn't have control of my body yet. Jon had control of his body, but he changed the physiology. Anyway, that's interesting to me. And I don't know if I fully agree with most people's timeline. Most people's timeline with Jon Jones goes something like this. People lost interest in Jon Jones. Jon was so successful, and he cleaned out the division, and he got rid of everybody, and there wasn't new meaningful contenders. That was kind of the belief. Now, we found out fight after fight, no, these guys are a little better than you're giving them credit for. Whether it was the razor-thin Dominic Reyes fight, whether it was the split decision Thiago Santos fight, there was some matches that were looking pretty damn close. But when you would go to a Jon Jones fight, you had people that were dressed up as empty seats. Less and less people had an interest. That's the way that the story would be told. I don't know that I agree. I don't know that people did lose interest in Jon. I think Jon lost interest in the division. I think that division quit being interesting to Jon. I think maybe Jon did look at some of those opponents as though they're not worthy, they don't belong here. I'm going to go in here, do what I do, and 25 minutes later, I'm getting my hand raised yet again, and then found himself in matches that were harder than he thought they were going to be. But that also comes back, not to a lack of training, not to a lack of preparation, not even to a lack of respect. He lost interest. Jon needed to get his interest back. I think that's what heavyweight represents. Jon is not going to see people dressed up as empty seats for a meaningful period of time. There are 3 mega, not just big, not just massive, I'm going one more, mega fights waiting for him right now. Stipe Miocic, Ciryl, gone. Francis Ngannou. Any way you want to do it, in any order that you do it in. Those are going to be some fascinating matches. Now, once you exhaust that, you might be back at square one. Hopefully some contenders come up. There's things that are outside of Jon's control. Jon just did an interview or made a comment on social media, but this is Jon speaking, and he just did this about 40 minutes ago, and he said, over the weekend, I locked myself in my office. I watched all sorts of videos on hypothetical opponents, meaning he's probably the big 3 I just talked about, Ciryl, Francis, and Stipe. He probably didn't go any further than that. Might have given a good look at Derek Lewis in there, but I suspect that's who Jon's talking about, though he didn't clarify. And then he said, I looked at myself. Started watching my own film. What I can do different, what I wish I was doing different. That's interest. I haven't heard Jon Jones speak that way in a period of time. I cannot recall a time ever when Jon said he locked himself in a room and just studied tapes of opponents and or himself. I don't ever recall that. So now you're talking again, to go back to the word, interest. Jon is now interested. Jon is re-engaged. I don't think that the fans ever left him. And I don't think the fans ever left the division. I think it was Jon that checked out. And I think that we can all also understand how that could happen. It's very hard. It's a hypothetical for the rest of us, right? We're never going to have the level of success that he had. He was so successful that he walked away from a world championship. I spent my life trying to get a world championship. I couldn't imagine giving it back. He had so many of them. He handed one back. Hard to relate to. But now you have Jon who's interested. People don't get better at something by not doing it. But I could give you other examples that people also can't do, but Jon found a way. I could give you several examples that wouldn't work for anybody else. Here's how I talk about Jon, and here's what I would encourage you. Don't copy him. Do not think, okay, here's what Jon Jones did. Here's what I'm going to do. It's all going to work out. I'm going to get the same result. Don't copy Jon, but also don't critique him. The greats in life, right now we're talking sport, but this could be anything in life. The greats in life are the ones that understand themselves early on. They know how much training they need, not the broad stroke, what the whole team needs, what the whole athlete needs. What do I need? They know the rest that they need. They need the food that they need. They know the distractions that they need. Jon did a very good job, whether you like it or not, of identifying those things for himself early. And yes, it's rinse and repeat. He's doing things now that he was doing then, and you think, hey, Jon, you could get away with it then. You were a younger guy. Now you're an adult. Set that aside. Jon does know Jon. And when Jon was interested, he went on to be the youngest champion in UFC history. I'm only submitting for you guys right now. I believe he's reinterested. I don't know that the light heavyweight division started closing the gap and catching up on Jon. I think in truth, Jon wasn't all that involved with the division for a period of time. I think that Jon recognized that. I think that Jon needed something new. He needed something exciting. He needed some parity. He needed a change. He was willing to take the risk. He was willing to take his oars out of the water, even though people were criticizing him, saying, you got to get out there and you got to be busy. He was able to lock in and do what was best for Jon. Nobody can take a break this long and come back and have their spot. It's never happened in any sport. I don't care if you're talking about bicycling, tennis. It's never happened. You couldn't offer me an example, but you're dealing with somebody who's already done stuff in his life and proven he can do things that nobody else can do. I'm hearing things about Jon Jones in the practice room, guys. He's doing great. I'm going to have to leave it at that. Jon Jones is doing great. So why? Why is he in the practice room when he has no fight coming up? Why is he locking himself in his office looking at a plethora of opponents instead of zoned in on one that he's got a contract with? Why? The answer isn't as sophisticated as you think. The heavyweights right now and the sport is something that Jon Jones finds interesting.